My name is Miguel Mata, first-generation American, retired military veteran, and now full-time college student. In my lifetime, I've come to meet people from all walks of life, from every corner of the country and most parts of the world, and what I can tell you is, everyone has a story. On my channel, I plan to share those stories with all of you and prove that despite the differences that make each of us who we are as individuals, fundamentally, we are all the same. And I believe that through the common thread of overcoming challenges, caring for our loved ones, and helping our communities, the rest of us will realize that our world is actually much brighter than some would make us think. And now, to shed more light. This Way Out. Hello and welcome back to another episode of This Way Out. Today I have a very special guest among all my special guests. Your name is, please?
My name is John Rhoton.
John Rhoton. John and I go to the College of Charleston together. When we were talking in school, you were kind of reluctant, like you didn't really feel like comfortable with the idea.
Well, yeah, I'm not always the most comfortable, like with crowds, cameras, things like that.
Right.
Even when I was in like elementary and middle school, I was very, very big on stage fright. Some of my jobs and careers have kind of helped, not necessarily get rid of it, but it's not as bad.
Right.
I don't always think of my story as actually being a story. I try not to look back at it too much. Like you were talking about looking for the positive, I was like, I don't really know how much I could give you. I mean, I try to look at the positive about it. I do laugh at a lot of my circumstances and things, and part of it is, where I was versus where I am. You kind of have to laugh at it because you've got to see the humor in it, because it's just going to drag you down otherwise.
Right.
And
You've been through a lot. And you said something just now, which is what kind of attracted me to talk and sitting down with you in the first place, because you said yourself you didn't feel like you necessarily had a story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that's true for anyone.
One of the guys he actually goes to school with us, Vance. He was in my geography class last fall, and he asked me about interviewing me about my separation from the military. He's trying to, at that point, he was trying to do a story to try and help some of the vets who were just getting out. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting. I looked at Vance and I was like, well, I didn't really have a hard time separating, and I actually ended up reaching back out to him because he got me to think about it. And I was like, you know what? There was a lot going on back then. Mm-hmm. There really was. And my separation, my transition, wasn't as smooth as I thought it was. And so when you approached me, and like I said, originally I really didn't think I had much of a story, but I've looked at some of the other people that you've interviewed and some of the other stories that you've done, and it's gotten me to think. And some of them I can relate to, some of them I can't. Some of them I'm just like, wow, how did they deal with that? Mm-hmm. And it's like, there probably is something there. Maybe mm-hmm. there is something there.
Something that you could share.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you saw some of the interviews that I've done, and you were able to take something away. Maybe you have something that you can...
Definitely.
Yeah.
Especially your interview like with Jessica, mm-hmm. and some of the things that she said, and I was kind of like, I never really thought about that, but some of her experiences while she was in the military, and when she was talking about both her training and a couple of times downrange, while on active duty, I didn't experience any of that, but there was a couple times where I was like, that sounds a little bit like some of the stuff I dealt with at MUSC and when I was working security.
We'll explore that part of your story here in a little bit, but let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
I'm actually from here in Somerville. I grew up here. I've lived in 2 different neighborhoods. I lived in Briarwood until I was in 8th grade, and then I moved to Quell Arbor 5. And kind of crash landed back here after some time away.
Yeah. After, I know that you had your stint in the military, but before that you attended college and stuff like that.
Yep.
Did you graduate high school?
We like to call it Fort Dorchester State Pen. We were one of the first schools to have ID badges. We were one of the first schools to have chain link gates slapped across our hallways where the football players came in and out before the game, and some other stuff. And yeah, so we jokingly called it State Penitentiary.
To Fort Dorchester.
Yes.
Were you a good student?
Part of me wants to plead the fifth on that.
I think it's a relevant question. Where did you? How about this? How about let's put it this way? Did you like school?
No, I did not. Basically, for me, it was going over the same material the last 3 years, 8th, 9th, 10th grade.
Right.
I was like, I'm done. I don't want to review the same stuff. So I was looking at dropping out. I was going to drop out of high school at the age of 16, and I don't know if my mother remembers it or not, but I'd kind of sort of said something to her about the possibility or the desire.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at joining the military, which is that, and one of my teachers was actually what got me to stay in school. Because the military at that point in time, when I spoke to the recruiters, they were telling me that all 4 branches combined were allowed to take 4 enlistees who did not have high school diplomas or GEDs across the entire nation.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that I was talking to actually told me that, according to the information they had, they didn't have internet and whatnot back then.
Right.
So there was a lot of phone calls and paper trails,
right.
But at that point in time, they already had 3. So there's only 1 slot left available,
mm-hmm.
which left me looking at the situation of, okay, it's going to be like a day to drop out, a day or 2 for paperwork. What if somebody else gets in there on that slot before me? What am I going to do at that point?
Right.
And I actually had one of my instructors, her name was Ms. Knight. I had her for both Sociology 1 and 2, and then I also had her for Practical Law 1 and 2. And she really pushed me to stay in and graduate.
This is in high school?
Yes.
Practical Law, Sociology?
Yes.
Wow, you guys, wow. Okay.
She really pushed me to stay in and graduate, and she actually worked a lot with me. Even my junior year, some of my credit hours were screwed up, and I ended up having to change my schedule during part of that year, and pick up one of the class credits that I needed for senior or whatever it was. But it took me out of one of her classes that I was in, but at the same time, that was a credit that I needed towards graduation. So she put me into one of her other classes, and then she did one-on-one study with me. Like, I would come into the classroom, I was on the roll,
that is so
and
cool.
She would give me a project, and I would go to the school library and do a research project or something. And yeah,
that to me is what makes teachers so awesome.
It is.
Because she had committed herself to your success.
After graduation, I left here for like 10 years, and I don't know if she's still around or not. But yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for her, I probably would not have graduated.
Dorchester? Fort Dorchester?
Yes.
If anybody watching this knows Miss Joe Knight from Fort Dorchester, around 1990s, late 90s, 97, right?
Yes.
John would like to be in touch with her. She made a difference in your life.
She made a large difference in my life.
Yeah. I'm going to scratch the surface, if you don't mind, on something maybe a little rough. But
dive right in.
What we did talk about is how your home life was difficult, to say the least. Would you say that Miss Knight was kind of a bright spot in your life, considering what your home life was?
Possibly. It's not something I really thought about before, but yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. My mother was encouraging, and there's several times when, because honestly. When I was in high school, I quit.
Yeah.
I scored great on tests, but I almost never did homework, so my grades were low. And my mom would always look at my grades and sit there and tell me, "I know you can do better." She's like, I think she was pulling her hair out, to be honest, because she didn't know what to do.
But mom was encouraging in an environment that wasn't necessarily.
It wasn't.
It was.
It
Yeah.
wasn't always.
It was turbulent.
Yes.
What was your mom doing at the time? What kind of work was she in?
My mom was she was a nurse at MUSC. She'd actually been doing nursing, well, for as long as I can remember, because and her and I have talked about this, and she kind of gets flabbergasted. I remember when my mother was working on her master's. She was working on her master's in nursing, and she was driving to Clemson from here. About
How far is that?
2 or 3 days a week. I want to say it's a 2-hour drive, but I'm not sure.
So at least 2 hours to get to school, 3 days out of the week.
Yes.
Ooh,
and I would go with her. She had a friend that I would stay with.
How old were you? Do you remember?
Oh, wow. I want to say 4, maybe 5.
Really?
I wasn't in kindergarten yet.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things that makes it memorable was I got chicken pox at that point. and when she called her friend to tell her, because her friend had kids of her own, she was like, "Oh no, bring him anyway."
Yep.
I think one or both of her kids had chicken pox too. So,
Yeah.
But that was one of the reasons why I remember, was because I was just so miserable with having these itchy red spots all over me. She was working on her master's back then, and so she ended up working for MUSC. And in her career as a nurse, she's gone from, she helped teach at the College of Nursing. She did some of the nursing clinicals. She worked down in the OR. She worked in the pediatrics ER. There's so many other things that she's done as well. And
I like the story that you told, because didn't you say something like you were in a training session or something like that?
my first times going through CPR class, I was like, well, unless it's changed, isn't it da 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 da? And they're kind of looking at me like, I thought you hadn't had CPR before. No, I really haven't, but my mom used to teach it and bring the stuff home.
Yeah.
There were times when I was in like elementary and middle school, my mother would bring home like one of the CPR dummies and a videotape. Yes, I said videotape. I'm that old.
VHS. It's not that long ago. If you said 8-track tape, then I might have judged you a little bit.
But yeah, she'd bring home a videotape because she was getting ready to teach a CPR class, and I'd be sitting or laying there on the couch and watching her go through this. She'd be looking at the book and going through some of the questions and stuff.
As she's working in this career, you're right there, right along the way.
Oh,
just kind of admiring her from afar, if you will, I guess.
Well, not always from afar. I actually spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. I remember when my brother started driving. My 4.5-year older brother. When he started driving, there was a few times we went out to the hospital to see her for one reason or another. Yeah, so yeah, 15, 16-year-old older brother taking his 12-year-old younger brother out to the hospital to see mom.
Yeah.
Go do something downtown. And by the time she retired, she was working in the infection control department for the hospital. She was one of like 4 or 5, maybe 6 nurses that were working.
I like how your eyes light up when you talk about your mom and how and the stuff that she's done. That's pretty cool. You're pretty close to your mom.
Yeah, we are. I can't deny that.
Hey guys, me again. Listen, one of the hardest things to do is to realize that the poor, difficult, turbulent, and even tragic experiences that you went through in the past can be molded and used into tools to shape a bright and successful future. Most of the people who live in some peace, at least in my experience, are those that were able to shape the difficulties that they experienced either in their youth or just in the past, and use that experience to create peace in there today. When you're able to use your past to strengthen you, when you figure that out, the future becomes a lot less intimidating. You can find help to do this through others, through your friends, through your family. There are professionals available that can help you do that, and they're only like a Google search away or a doctor visit. Life is not as complicated as we may make it out to be sometimes. So we had talked about how you had graduated high school. You weren't much for the schooling, but you graduated thanks to
Miss Knight.
You did join the service, but you said you
Didn't
you
go
join right after?
right away. No, I spent 3 semesters in college, which is kind of I started the secondary education program. That was a bit of a mess, and that was actually where I met my first wife.
Mm.
So, which that too was a learning experience. Don't get me wrong. She gave me 3 wonderful, beautiful kids, ages 19, 18, and 16, and our first part of our marriage was pretty good. I mean, we both made mistakes. At one point, when we were trying to talk and be amicable again, she tried to say that we just got married at too young of an age, and we were just too young, too inexperienced, and didn't really know what we were getting into. And yeah, there's some truth to that, but at the same time, there were other things as well.
Were you two married when you joined the service?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, she actually had a lot to do with that, because I was working 3 jobs at the time. She knew that going into the military was something that I had wanted to do, and she kind of pushed.
She encouraged you.
She did. She pushed and she encouraged me. I wasn't too sure about leaving the kids, because we had 2 before I enlisted. I really wasn't sure about leaving her and the kids and whatnot, but with her encouragement, yeah.
Did you make it through your active duty service, or did it kind of fall apart during? I guess what I'm getting at is, I know you said she was your first wife.
Yes.
You guys eventually ended up separated. Was it while you were in the military? And I guess what I'm more curious about is, if it didn't, was the military the reason behind your divorce?
It our separation and divorce started while I was still on active duty. No, well, part of me wants to say no, part of me wants to say yes.
Because the military is demanding, you know what I mean?
It is.
And it's not for everybody.
It's not.
It's hard.
There was some things there that probably some of it has to do with the military, and other parts of it had to do with the 2 of us, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. But partly why I'm asking that question is because, you and I did the same work. We were both in aircraft maintenance, and in that line of work, it's very demanding.
Oh, yeah.
It requires a lot of your time and your effort and your energy and your brain power. I know that there were plenty of times, I retired 20 years of doing that, the last 5-ish years spent in an office, but that's just kind of how things play out. But either way, being, PCS's moves, deployments, temporary duties, and different, and it takes a toll,
It does.
And I know that there were plenty of times whenever I would come home, and just be gassed, like I can't function, and to have to come home and be play dad, play the father role, play the husband role, and what's required of that. I can imagine maybe that was difficult. I'm not trying to lead you on. I'm just trying to say, I'm not trying to... Objection! Leading the witness?
It had its difficulties. I can't deny that.
Right.
My kids and I can't say my wife did. I don't know if she did, but I know there were times when my wife and kids came out to the squadron house. There were times when my kids liked it. They had an interest in the aircraft, and some of the stories that the guys would tell, and thankfully some of my guys would clean up their language and their topics of discussion.
Launch truck talk. Okay. So I could feel that we're getting ready to get into the military talk. Not what this is about. This is this is about you. Okay, so to get it back on track and not about such good stuff. Your relationship with your wife unfortunately didn't work out.
No, it did not. So yeah, we ended up going our separate ways. I really don't want to. Yeah, that was.
You don't have to get into the weeds about it if you don't feel comfortable.
I haven't spoken to her in years.
Mm-hmm.
But I know for me that my life turned around. Not necessarily after her. It took another marriage and a half, but
yeah,
definitely after my second divorce, things started looking better,
right.
and at least for a while.
And shortly after your separation, or around the same time, is whenever you separated from the military, or
Yeah.
you were discharged from the military.
Yep, and that whole medical discharge came up and brought me back here.
Yeah, I know that was a rough patch as well, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think of whether or not we want to. You know what? Let's just leave that as is. We'll just say that you didn't do anything wrong, right? It's a medical discharge. It wasn't a dishonorable or nothing like that. So, man's not a criminal. I'm just saying that the transition. Sometimes, if you don't mind me saying so, sometimes when you exit the military, there are a lot of there can be some missed steps, and those missteps are still being ironed out even today. And it's been how long since you got
out? I got out in 2007.
So 12 years.
Yeah.
So here we are 12 years later, and unfortunately
there are still some issues that are being in the works. We'll just say.
Unfortunately, and the unfortunate part, one, not only is it happening to you, but that happens to a lot of people. So if you want more information on that, just turn on your TV. Long story short, your separation from the military, not so much your transition. Well, would you say your transition, how would that have gone?
Transition back to civilian life?
Yeah.
Oh, originally I thought it was going to be fine. I actually had, in my eyes, such a short period that I served on active duty, and even while I was on active duty, I tried to maintain some identity of myself before I went in, and I thought I had done pretty well. But a few months after I got out, I started working security at MUSC, and it didn't take long for me to figure out that working in the civilian world is not the same as working in the military. The first time I pulled 14 or 16-hour shift working security, I was called into the boss's office the next day, and he told me, can't do that.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I was like, what are you talking about? Do it all the time. And he goes, no. Military is a different ball game. On the civilian side, you can't do that. That's illegal. And I didn't understand. I got called into his office for it one more time before it kind of sort of sunk in.
Yeah.
I had 2 times that I did that. I thought I was helping out, and for the 2 shifts that I was helping, I kind of did help them, but I was putting my boss at risk, and I didn't know, and I didn't understand.
Yeah, I think that it all depends on what work you go into. I got a friend of mine who is a doctor. Kind of a neat little story himself. I wonder if I'll be able to get him on here. Scotty, newcomer, are you out there? Are you watching? Yeah, he was an electrician. He ended up becoming a doctor.
Nice.
But his story is, I wish we were still doing 12, 16 hour shifts. But either way though, there was an adjustment.
Oh, definitely.
There was an adjustment that you had to make. MUSC security. Now this is where you had some rough experiences, and I don't know if we got Abby in the shot there.
No, she's a little bit low.
Abby is.
Hold on a minute. Come here, baby.
Yeah, there she is.
There we go.
Abby is John's service dog, and clearly marked.
There we go. Now we really got her.
Clearly marked PTSD service dog. Do not distract. And some of that a lot of the reasons why Abby is here with us has to do with those experiences that you had as security in MUSC, yes?
It does, and it actually took me a while to realize that. I know probably within a few months, I don't even think I was there a year yet, and when I was relieving day shift, because I usually work evenings, I usually work second shift from I guess 4 to midnight or whatever, and we were relieving day shift down in, my post was down in a pediatrics emergency. And there was a family, mom had brought the child in, and she kept telling the staff, I don't know what's wrong, I don't know what's wrong.
I just want to put this disclaimer out there, just for my sake and for your sake.
Yes.
If you don't feel comfortable sharing that story, then you don't have to. Because I know you shared it earlier.
Yeah.
And you said that
I think I'll be all right.
Okay.
But she kept telling the medical staff, I don't know what's wrong. He's just not acting he's not acting normal. He's not acting normal. And the staff was they did their blood draws, blood tests, they did neurological, they did whatever they could trying to find something, because to all appearances at that point in time, this still newborn, but on the older side of newborn, looked fairly normal, but mom kept saying the behavior says that he's not acting normal. But she really couldn't put her finger on what was wrong. Well, by the time my guys came down there, by the time my shift came down there, we were actually in the area because the kid had passed away. And I remember at one point I was standing across the hall from my supervisor, and he looked at me and he goes, he could tell something was wrong, and he's like, John, are you okay? I looked at him and I told him honestly, no. I said, this child is the same age as my youngest. And he goes, do I need to relieve you? Do I need to find somebody else? I was like, no. The fact that I recognized that I had an issue, I should have taken myself off. And I'm kind of surprised that he didn't, because I was the type who would always hide it. And for him to be able to tell, I really am surprised. And maybe it's because I was adamant. But yeah, that was a hard one for me. And
I know you had shared a story that you had to get in Riot Gear one time for something.
Well, I wasn't in Riot Gear, but we've got hospital security who works inside the hospital, and we've got public safety, which is the police department, who works outside the hospital. Now, they come into the hospital if we call them. And I was over at the Institute of Psychiatry, and we had somebody who left a patient in a wheelchair, and they had left the IV pole on the wheelchair. Guys, if you work in a mental hospital, don't do this. Okay. The guy was highly agitated, and he managed to slide the upper part of the IV pole out of the sleeve and was brandishing it like a club. So yeah, we ended up calling public safety in, and they had the riot shield, and I went in with them. That really could have gone worse than what it did. Yeah. That was one of the other times where there was a high probability of somebody getting hurt, whether it was one of our guys or it was him. And that just the situation.
Right. If you don't mind, I'm gonna transition from your time at MUSC to I think either immediately after or shortly after you became a certified EMT, right?
Yes, I did. I went back to school while I was still working there, and then I had completed the class, but I hadn't taken the certification test yet when I quit because I was already registered for my advanced class.
What'd you think of being an EMT?
I liked it. I had already talked to my boss at that point. Well, I talked to my boss a few years before I even left, telling him I wanted to become a police officer. I was trying to get out of the hospital and back into the street, and that didn't exactly work out with a couple of hiring freezes with people that were looking to hire me. They ended up going on a hiring freeze when the economy fell, blah, 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 type of deal. But
I just wrote about that.
The EMT worked out, and I loved it, being out on the street. Dude, I worked more accidents off the clock than on it.
Oh, really?
I either rolled up on it or became inches of being part of it when the guy went flying over another car. And
right.
Some of those were actually kind of scary, to be honest. But yeah, I enjoyed it. if I could to this day, if I could get back on an ambulance, I would. There are calls, if I listen to a scanner, there's calls that I sit there and go, God, I'm glad that's not me on that call. Then there's other calls when I sit there and I listen to it and I was like, oh man, I can't tell you how much I miss it. The adrenaline rush, the being there, and just
the fact that you listened to a scanner is all the evidence I need that it made it. That was you enjoyed doing that kind of work.
I do, or I did. I mean, even after my certification has been expired for almost a year,
right.
and I tried to go on inactive, but when I tried to go on an inactive status to keep my to keep my certification, I couldn't do it. I've actually done some work. Even after it expired, I've done some work. One of the guys at the bar, when he was leaving, laid his bike down with a girl on the back of it. I had another guy who fell down the stairs and busted his skull open enough that when I went to treat him and I was looking at the wound, I could see the skull through the back of his head.
Yeah.
And it was pretty bad. And that one was that was the last one that I worked, and it may very well be the last one that I do work, because that one shook me. I was glad that I had Abby with me. There was some guys there who were helping me out. I don't know what got to me because I'd seen worse, but I was okay. I was hanging outside. I had a beer, smoking a cigarette when it happened, and when he didn't get up and I started seeing the blood on the ground, my first response was the EMT kicked in. I was like, all right, we got to go do this.
Right.
EMT kicked in, and I was doing what I could. I was bandaging him, trying to stop the bleeding. I was asking my questions, trying to do a mental assessment, which the guy's brain was obviously it was very obvious within a matter of minutes that the guy had a mild, if not severe, concussion. And one of the other girls that fell with him, she ended up having a couple of cracked ribs, which was what I was afraid of, but there's nothing I can do about that. Even if I was in the back of a truck, there's nothing I could do about that.
Mm-hmm.
And EMS arrived. I gave turnover to one of the paramedics that I knew because she'd actually gone to school with me, and after I gave my turnover, I flipped the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the story deviates, because I've spoken to guys who were there, and what they see and what they say is not what is in my head or not what I remember. I remember literally clawing my way up the stairs going back to the bar right around closing time. And Abby was kind of going with me, pushing. She was staying there with me. But when I talked to some of the other guys who were there, they were like, you had a blank look in your face, but they were like, I asked if you were okay, and you just, I'm fine, even though you just had this pale white blank look. And one of the guys was like, somebody handed you your cane. They were like, where's your cane? And I handed you your cane, and you calmly walked up the stairs and back into the bar after talking with one of the bartenders because they were pushing everybody out. And like I said, that's kind of where it deviates, because that's between what they say and what they saw is not what was going on in my brain.
Do you had that experience kind of, I mean, even though it's like you said, it shook you, even though you'd been through worse, you kind of, it ended up being a traumatic episode.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about, I mean, just talking about it now, how do you feel about it? I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm just curious. What I'm curious about is, like, do you feel like you've, I guess, recovered from that experience, or is that part of your trauma?
I don't think
disorder.
I don't think it's something that I'll ever recover from. It's talking about it's not easy, although I force myself to talk about it. But at the same time,
excuse me.
I don't understand.
Well,
I think that's part of my real problem is I don't understand. I've seen worse. I've been through worse. And
let's look at it. Once again, I'm not your counselor. I'm not any of that stuff. But this is something that pops into my head. So I'll just ask you, what you think. You already had Abby,
yep.
Right? She's your PTSD service dog. So you'd already been diagnosed, right? Okay. You'd already had experiences in the past. And here was this new experience that you were going through, and you were trying to help, but you willed yourself through it, if you will, by helping treat this guy, and because you said you were with him until the paramedics showed up, right? But here you are in this situation again, the same type of situation that has led you to this PTSD disorder, and you're experiencing it again, you're doing it again, and is it too much of a stretch? Once again, I'm not a professional, but is it too much of a stretch to maybe at least presume that doing that? I don't want to say that because it's not that something is wrong with you, but you have a disorder, you have a condition, and if you have an illness, right? If something makes you sick, you're going to stay away from whatever it is that makes you sick. However, you have this condition, and now you're being exposed to that, what gave you this condition in the first place. So it only makes sense that it would affect you in this way, I'm connecting dots.
I understand what you're trying to say. It's like it's kind of like somebody's, for whatever reason, they can't eat shellfish. Every time they have it, they throw up or whatnot.
Right.
You stay away from shellfish.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable and it makes sense.
Right. And I understand how you could feel compelled to help.
Relating it to that well, not that situation, but situations like that. Would I walk away? Would I just drive away or whatnot?
Could you? That to me is the question. Is could you? I don't think that's an easy answer. I would imagine that would be a very difficult pill to swallow, to be like, I want to help, but I can't help because it hurts me.
I don't know. I mean, if it was something minor that I knew they'll be okay, it'd be like,
right.
Okay, whatever, keep walking. Something major, especially if first responders or something weren't there, probably not, and I'd probably pay the price later, but I probably wouldn't be able to walk away.
And I wouldn't. I wouldn't blame you, but the other, I wouldn't blame you either way. I wouldn't blame you if you help because you feel compelled to help because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. And then the other, I wouldn't blame you if you walked away because to be involved in that could trigger another episode.
It could. I mean, I might be fine, but at the same time, it could trigger something. But that's just one of those things. That
Yeah. Wow. It's very complex question, very complex situation. I almost skipped over the reason that you have this device on your leg. Tell us about this thing and why you wear it.
Well, one of my last calls as an EMT, I was working on a bariatric patient, and I didn't have a lift assist available to me. Mm-hmm. We called dispatch, and we had 2 trucks on the road, and one of them was doing long distance transport out of town, so they couldn't come. And because it wasn't considered an emergency, I was working private transport. We were taking for a doctor's appointment. Fire wouldn't come out. Mm-hmm. That area, fire only came out for emergencies. But we needed to do the transport anyway, or we were pressured to do the transport. At this point in time, I honestly, either me or my medic, we technically should have told management they can stuff themselves and we're not doing it because physically we can't, but we didn't. I was still in that mindset of mission first, regardless of what it takes. The mission comes first. So we did the transport, and that was probably, as far as an EMS career is concerned, the worst mistake I could have made. Mm-hmm. I was put on light duty. I went on workman's comp. I ended up fighting with workman's comp because they kept swearing up and down.
What kind of injuries did you sustain from doing that?
Initially, they said it was a shoulder injury, but I was noticing neurological deficits. I really couldn't lift at all with my right arm, and my right arm had no temperature regulation. Anything below 75, my arm would start to freeze, and you could see where it would turn pale, like it was cold. Mm-hmm. So I was sent to an orthopedist, and as well as going through physical therapy, and I got really lucky because one of the physical therapists who worked with me, she was actually a physical therapist assistant instead of a full physical therapist, but she did a lot with neurological things and started recognizing that there was some neurological deficits, and when it wasn't getting any better, she kind of did some nerve stretches, I want to call it. But it got to the point where even she was saying that there's some kind of nerve damage there, and she was putting it in her notes. And so between her notes and fighting with the insurance company for workman's comp finally agreed to do an MRI. I honestly think they wanted to do it because they thought it would come back with clear results,
right,
and they could close out the case. Unfortunately for them, that was not the case. They found 3 herniated discs, which obviously weren't there before. But there was an even worse complication of they found a tumor in the middle of my spinal cord, which was actually behind the area of those herniated discs. Mm-hmm. We do know that it was non-cancerous. Mm-hmm. The real problem is that 3% of the population across the world has it. Ependymoma or something like that. Mm-hmm. I probably just slaughtered the name, I'm sorry. But even my mother has a hard time saying it. Yeah. But yeah, it's very rare. And because of the fact that it was growing in the middle of the spinal cord, whether you know it or not, your spinal cord is actually encased in kind of sort of a, not really a sac, but something, it's kind of wrapped in something. Mm-hmm. With the tumor itself growing in the middle of the cord, between the sleeve on the outside, because it only gives so much, and then the tumor on the inside growing, and it continues to grow, it's putting pressure on all of those filaments that run back and forth, which is causing nerve damage. And the nerve damage was just getting worse. Started out in the right arm, went to the right leg. Talking with my neurosurgeon over at the VA, who actually worked both with the VA and with MUSC, he was, even when I went and got a second opinion, he was the neurosurgeon who was recommended by pretty much everybody. He agreed. He gave me the name, had me do some research and whatnot, and when I came back and asked him, I said, look, if we do surgery for this, according to my research, it says I've got greater than 40% chance of being paralyzed. And he said, yeah. He's like, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to beat around the bush. You do. We don't usually see it in people your age. We see it in young kids, in which case they usually make a full recovery because they're still growing. Mm-hmm. And we see it in older, a lot of times geriatric patients, in which case they don't do well. Mm-hmm. We did a spinal tap to try and figure out if it was cancerous or not. I had complications during the spinal tap, and I had complications after the spinal tap. And originally my neurosurgeon was like, we don't have to do the surgery, we can wait if you want to. But with what happened during the spinal tap, I called my neurosurgeon. I was like, I can't live like this. I was like, my head hurts, I'm in pain. I was like, I've got this, I was like, I can't do this. I said, I don't know what happened since the spinal tap, but I cannot live like this. I said, we have to do the surgery. Mm-hmm. And so we put it together, and the end of September, the surgery was done, September 27th, 2017. And it was funny, because when I woke up in the ICU, I had no feeling below the waist. But one of the first things I did was move my legs. Oh, yeah. They bent at the knee. No feeling, but they moved. And I was like, I can handle that. Yeah. And I said, whether the feeling comes back or not, I'll figure that out later. But right now, the legs still move. So, and it's been an interesting road. For a while, I mean, my neurosurgeon told me coming out, at the bare minimum, whatever nerve damage I had going in is what I would come out with. But he was also encouraging, but he was realistic enough with me to say that a year from your surgery date, whatever your deficits are, there probably would not be an improvement after a year. So in school, whenever I've got classes that are on a different floor, I try to take the stairs. I try to stay mobile, which is what it is for me. And at the beginning of the fall semester, I wasn't used to climbing stairs, so I knew it was going to be tough to begin with. Yeah. Probably, but like most people, as you do it more regularly, it becomes easier type of deal. And for the first half of the semester, it was like that. It became easier. I could get to the fourth floor, not a problem. As the semester started coming down to a close, it was getting to be more and more difficult. It got to the point where, even though I'm doing this every day, I would stop on the second floor, sometimes on the third floor if I was really pushing, but then I would have to stop. Mm-hmm. I'd be tired. I couldn't lift my leg, and I'd be worn out. So when I started talking to both of my doctors and my care team about this, they decided to put me back in physical therapy. And after 2-3 months of physical therapy, it was discovered that I'd made all the forward progress that I was going to be able to make. And my therapist, which was totally different than the one that I'd had before with workman's comp, she specialized in neurological damages. And she started talking to me about Bioness, which are the devices on my legs. And she thought it might help, and I kind of hemmed and hawed because I didn't want anything that I would become dependent on, because as my body became more dependent on something, that's going to increase the decline. But she was telling me, her and the representative, because they've got a sales rep that comes out to the VA about once a month, and she's the one who's actually in charge of all of the Bioness units and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them reassured me and reaffirmed it's not something your body's going to become dependent on. The electrical stimulus and impulses are used to strengthen. And what it does is it kind of sort of senses when I'm flexing the muscle,
Mm-hmm.
and it sends a minute current into the muscle to assist so that it contracts even more.
Yeah.
So it does help me walk.
Wow. Wow. All of that, the discovery of the tumor was a result of pushing yourself too hard on the job.
A whole nother world was open to me.
Yeah. But you said you feel like it's helping.
It does, and I describe it as a whole nother world's been open to me, because even though I really don't have a lot of actual feeling in my leg, I still get phantom sensations,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting. One of my friends that I see usually on the weekends, he's got a friend of his that was in a car accident, I want to say 6 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he ended up losing his leg. And I met him. First time I met him, he was in a wheelchair, and then sometime later when I saw him, he had a prosthetic. And him and I were talking, and we had a really interesting conversation because I was able to relate to him, and he
Mhm.
was actually able to relate to me with the lack of feeling in my leg, and talking about phantom pains, phantom sensations, and things like
Yeah.
that. And I actually got some encouragement from him, and he walked away with some encouragement from
That's
me as
good.
well.
Yeah. That's
So I thought that was really cool, because I mean, just for me, having somebody else that I
Yeah.
could relate to
Yeah.
with something that some people would argue it's nothing like what what he's been through is nothing like what you've been through, and
Screw
vice
those
versa.
people.
And to an extent, they're
Sorry.
right, but at the same time, there are things there that we can relate to each
Yeah,
other.
but
and
I
we
mean,
can use
did
each
you-
other to give encouragement.
Like, what's the point of making a fuss about splitting hairs about details?
And I
You know
agree.
what I mean? If you walked away feeling better than you were before, and you think, you made a difference in somebody else's life, to me, that's all that matters.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, somebody else can say something, and so why are you making it, his versus it's mine, whatever. Why does it matter? Him and I are bonding over it, and we're having to, it helps both of us.
Yeah. But let's talk about this final chapter, what you're doing right now, which is going to the College of Charleston. What are you majoring in?
Currently, I am majoring in education and political science, and I have a minor with crime law and society.
Lord of mercy.
Exactly.
That sounds like a full docket.
It's definitely a lot of work. I don't deny that. I've had some people that have asked me, so what's your timetable to graduate? Like, I don't want to set myself to something. Now, my goal is to be a full-time student for as long as I need to be a full-time student to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to sit there and give myself a timetable and start beating myself over the head if I don't.
Right.
If I start falling behind for one reason or another.
You have a completely different relationship with academics than you did when you were in high school, yes?
Yes, I very much so do. Oh my word. Yeah, I went back to school. I've been in school almost consistently since 2012. I've acquired 2 certifications, and then on top of that, I acquired my Associate of Arts, and should have, still waiting to hear back about acquiring my Associate of Generalized Science. At one point I started a Criminal Justice Associates. I kind of sort of threw that on the back burner. It's kind of like, I don't know what to do with that. I'll just throw that in the back burner for right now. I moved over from Trident Tech to the College of Charleston, and found it is a very different atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Some good, some bad.
Probably a little bit has to do with the younger crowd.
Yes,
We don't have to go into that, but I know what you're feeling.
Trident Tech has a much broader range of ages when it comes to school, and there's been more people that I could kind of sort of relate to. Some of them older than me, some of them younger than me, some of them my age.
They've got a very narrow view of the world. They only have this. The way I explain it to, or the way I've explained it to others is that, these are 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, right? And the only way that they know how to express themselves, or the perspective that, the only way they know how to express themselves is from an 18 or 19 or 20-year experience perspective.
Yeah, kind of.
I'm not buying it.
please don't take this the wrong way. But being in with my major in political science,
Yeah.
and having to take political science classes, that's kind of a requirement for the major. You would think people would be a little bit more open-minded in the learning spectrum.
Mm.
They're not.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to carry on a discussion, or even a debate for that matter, with some of these people.
Look, man, they're kids. They're young people. They're young people, and I don't know if you remember when you were younger. Definitely when I was younger, just being full of piss and vinegar when you're a kid, and you just think you got it. You think you got it all figured out, and I think that that might be most of the opposition that you're up against when it comes to having like trying to have an intelligent conversation.
I hope so. I hope that's all it is. It sounds bad.
Look,
yes,
it'll be.
I really do hope that's all it is.
There will be a growing up process for these people. I'm confident of that.
Well, there's a growing up process for everybody at every age group. I mean, my first semester at College of Charleston, there was kind of sort of a growing up process there with me, for me as well, because 40-year-old single white male going back to school at a liberal arts college.
Yeah,
there's a couple classes I walked into and I was like, what am I doing? Why am I here?
Yeah.
What am I doing to myself?
Yeah. What's the goal? What are you shooting towards?
I kind of.
And it's okay to say I don't know. Just there's no judgment here. If you're not sure, whatever.
Honestly, I'm gonna run with that from the 100% perspective. I really don't know, but one of the reasons why I picked both of those, both the political science and the education, is because both of them open up doors. One of the things that I've learned in different companies that I've worked for, both with the EMS and with MUSC, a couple companies that I worked for, a couple summers while I was home from college during that first 3 semesters. A lot of employers, they will use and take advantage of, not take advantage of, but they will use, or at least find a use for somebody with an educational background.
Yeah.
It's kind of a high commodity.
Yeah.
With political science, that goes in so many different directions. You've got people who, geography is part of political science. You've got actual politics you can
Yeah, me
sort
too.
of get involved with. There's research and study programs and things like that.
Yeah.
You can take it different ways. It can actually be used in different companies and corporations, especially higher up. And with the various experiences and kind of sort of certifications and degrees, I can, if I found myself teaching on a high school level, I can run or teach almost any subject.
Mm-hmm. So what I want to say, I'm going to give you the last word though, but what I will say is that it sounds like you're maybe it's not entirely accurate to say that you're in a better place, but it seems like you're in a place of better awareness. Would you say that's a fair assessment.
I do like that wording. Yeah, I can agree with that. I also, well, I mean, when I look back to some of the places that I have been, both mentally and physically, I would say that I'm probably in a better place as well as in a better space in my head. I do tend to pay a bit more attention as far as what's going on with me, whereas before I would try and block it out and just focus on whatever needed to be done.
Yeah. Well, to me that's encouraging. What I know personally, when it comes to mental health, a big part of it is awareness and acknowledging that a problem exists. Part of what makes those issues worse is just packing them in the back of your subconscious or whatever and just not acknowledging them.
I can definitely agree with that. And to be perfectly honest, I would agree that, and I would also state that's probably what got me where I was as far as being so bad off that I had no choice.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to go one of two ways, and the direction that it was I knew it could possibly go one of two ways, and the direction that it was going on its own was not good.
Right.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I did try to push it away for so long, and I tried to sit there and go, "There's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
This is just part of growing older, or this is just me, and now that I've got more freedom or whatnot, but it wasn't. It really wasn't."
So what I would like to give you the opportunity to do is, you've got space and opportunity and an audience, right? What I like to ask is, if there was one thing that you've always wanted to share with others, or one thing that you've always wanted to tell somebody, right? What would that thing be? What's that one piece of advice that you would want to share with anybody who is willing to listen?
I'm actually going to go, there's two things I would like to say, if I can take that. First one is the people that are close to you, always keep an eye on them. You never know what they're going through. Look for changes in mood, mood swings. Just look for signs of a struggle. And it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that they're depressed or anything like that. It could just be going through a hard time, or they're struggling with something in general. People that you work around all the time. EMS, we notice it in our partners. Law enforcement, security work, if we've got somebody that we're partnered with on a regular basis, we notice it, but at the same time, we don't want to talk about it. Because part of the problem is it may bring up something within us, or it may reveal something in us that we ourselves are trying to deny. But I mean, and then you've got your friends, whether it's outside of work, on the civilian side, or whatever. Them too. I mean, having a hard time in their marriage, maybe you can help them. Kind of sort of offer encouragement. The other thing is for people that are out there struggling with stuff, you're not alone. I know a lot of times it feels like you're alone, but you're really not. I know that there are times when I felt like I was alone, and I put myself in the situation where I was alone simply because of the fact I didn't want to bother, or I didn't want to burden other people. But at the same time, it goes back to friends. I've got a friend of mine, Christy, who she knows and she recognizes when I'm going through a hard time. She knows when I'm spiraling. I'll usually tell her, or I'll tell my ex-roommate, Melanie, that I just can't do it right now. I'm turning my phone off or whatnot, and if they haven't heard from me within a couple of days, one or both will show up at the house. And they just want to make sure that, hey, we're here for you, and it's time for you to get your ass out of bed and out the fucking door. And we will. They will literally drag me out to go do something. And sometimes it's all it takes, sometimes it's not, but at the same time, getting out of the house is better than sitting in the house, because it's just going to get darker and darker.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you need help, reach out. I mean, there's people there's always somebody who cares. I know when I first started hanging out down at the Veterans Lounge with you guys, I was looking for an escape because I didn't want to deal with some of the people that were in some of my classes. I just gotten frustrated and I was shutting down to not be around the students. And finding you guys down in the lounge and talking with you guys helped a lot, and it still helps.
Yeah.
I still tell Jessica to this day, there's times when I sit down in her office and I just talk to her.
If I have work to do, I don't go there.
Because it's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't. If I have to legitimately do some work, then I don't go there. I go to the library, but I go there and I mess up everybody else's day by talking everybody's ear off.
Yep, I love you guys. There's been a few times where I've kind of just been kind of blah or in a blah mood or feeling down and no real reason. Maybe it's the depression kicking in. Who knows? Does it really matter? No, but going down there and somebody else coming down there, whether they've got something that they're dealing with themselves or they're working on a school project, like when Anna was having to watch that German video.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Or somebody has something really exciting that they want to share. Somebody was talking about a job that they were looking at getting at or whatnot, and it helped. It really did.
That, yeah. It's a support group. It's like a support group.
Guys that were in the military, and it's not exactly the same, but there is a very strong bond, and there's that similarity.
Yeah.
And again, it's reaching out for help.
Yeah.
I don't have to say anything. I just go down there, and whether they realize it or not, it helps.
Well, I know it does serve me some good, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like everybody is that space is very, very good for it. And but John, I appreciate you doing this, man. I appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate you sharing your story. I really hope that you're able to get something out of it, and I know that somebody who watches this will be able to take something away from it too. And I really feel like good can come of it.
Oh, definitely.
Right? For you and for maybe somebody who might be watching this. So I appreciate you sitting down with me and talking and sharing. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Honestly, I've really enjoyed this. Gave me an opportunity to do some self-reflection and something that I don't normally do. And just like you were talking about, it's been beneficial. I can definitely see where currently in my head I'm a hell of a lot better than I used to be.
Good.
And like I say, regardless of what's going on, if you can't laugh at yourself, then there's something wrong there. That's probably one of the signs for yourself that you might want to start looking to get help.
Yeah, if you can't find the silver lining there.
Yes.
If you're having that much trouble, yeah, definitely. Thanks for tuning in. This has been This Way Out. I'm Miguel. John, if you like videos like this and you want to see more of them, please subscribe, like. I'm getting better at this. If you like videos like this and you want to see more, subscribe, like, hit the little notification bell, comment, etc. blog. Also, This Way Out is on Facebook. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and I also have a website, thiswoe-light.com. You can find this video as well as a blog and some feature articles that I'm writing. This Way Out. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, and the world's not as dark as
I once thought.
Sometimes we think it is. Thanks for tuning in. See you soon. God bless.